community. I'm here tonight to talk about the Career Academy. Well, let me back up. I want to thank you all for the budget you're going to approve for rebuilding Osborne. I think it's going to get approved, and I appreciate that. I'm here to talk about the Career Academy. We want to make sure the Career Academy stays in our community. We keep hearing talk about they want to move it elsewhere. When we was voted on Splash 5, it was voted to stay in the Osborne community. Also, there's talk about if it stays in our community, that the students' grades will go elsewhere. Well, a precedent has been set for that. When you build Pebblebrook, the performing arts of Pebblebrook, the students, the parents didn't have a choice but to send their kids to Pebblebrook High School. They didn't have an option. So we want the same thing in our community. We're only one of the few schools in the area that doesn't have a specialty. People have magnet programs, IB programs, things of that nature. We don't have any of that. It will help our community tremendously. Things are changing in our community. It will help us grow. It can make our property values go up. And also, we think it will make our parents keep our kids home. A lot of our top kids, we lose the top 10% of our kids every year. A lot of all those Career Academy, those kids will stay home with the engineering program, things like that in there. And they'll stay and make our community better. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Renee Dodd, who will discuss mandatory reporters and special ed. Hello. And she'll be followed by Alan Rohde.
Thank you. I moved to Cobb County about 15 years ago. I was very proud to move into this county for its great reputation with its school system and preparing our students to go out into the world. I live in East Cobb, which is also well known for its high test scores. But now that I have a child in the system, it's my only child. She's 10 years old and in 5th grade. I found the school system is failing both her and even other students up to the high school level, which is why I'm here tonight. In the past year, I've been able to take a closer look and have done my due diligence to bring me here tonight because I feel the good reputation is starting to fade away with poor management and underfunded programs. My first concern is my daughter. Then the lack of support for her and other children that learn differently and have what some call hidden learning disabilities. And the handouts that I provided kind of goes more into detail of what these types of learning disabilities are, such as dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyslexia. My daughter, she's quiet, she's sweet, she's caring. She's won the award for most compassionate 2 years in a row at her school. But she's also a split learner. She excels in some classes, but she struggles in others. For the last 3 years, starting in 2nd grade, we've worked through the steps in the school system, and now she is 3 grade levels behind in one subject, and her confidence and her self-esteem are crushed. I've done a lot of digging on what could be done to keep this from happening to others, as I'm not the only one. Through social media, through school events, through church, I keep hearing over and over again that I'm not the only one going through this. In the handout that I provided you, for children with these hidden specific learning disabilities, what is available now is not working. It takes years to implement with the child while the child is struggling, which causes emotional harm, and the teachers are overwhelmed, need more training, and more kids are needing this help as the demand is getting higher with them. I have 5 suggestions. 1 is earlier evaluations and intervention to determine that they have this learning disability. 2, improved teacher training to recognize these learning disabilities and to provide the correct support. 3, more SSAs and special ed teachers to meet the demand of students needing more assistance. In educating parents, and also partnering with other organizations.
30 seconds.
The second concern is the mandated reporter law. We had a child predator at Pope High School who managed to work around the mandated reporter law. From 2011 to about 2017, he got away with working with these boys in the wrestling program. In 2017, he pled guilty to over 500 counts of sexually assaulting boys in Pennsylvania, including bringing them down here to Cobb County. But yet to this day, Cobb County hasn't done anything, and neither has the high school.
Time is done. Our next speaker is Alan Rohde, who will discuss Osborne Career Academy, followed by Natalie Carlamagno.
Thank you, Board, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. Appreciate your commitment to education in our county. I'm a product of McEachern High School. It was a tremendous place to go, and graduated in '88. I moved away and came back in early '90s to work for Home Depot Corporate, and I moved into a home in the Osborne community. It was a great place to live. I love my neighbors, great homes. Started to learn about the community. Followed the news stories about the SPLOST that we voted on in 2013. Got real excited about the Career Academy and got real involved in my community. I work as a realtor now. I continue to meet people in the community that are very proud graduates of Osborne High School. They're professional athletes. They're gurus of economics at Kennesaw that we take direction from. They are home builders. They are very accomplished athletes. They have a tremendous amount of pride. And I'd like to see that spirit live in our community again. It does seem like it's dwindled some. And I believe the Career Academy can be part of that. 3 weeks ago, the Mableton Improvement Coalition held a panel discussion on commercial development. They brought in county leaders, state leaders, a variety of leaders. They had a great discussion. It was a packed house. What I came away from that was the three things that Mableton needs to do to grow are to focus on its educational assets, mainly Chattahoochee Tech, to continue to ask the community how they can help businesses grow, and to look to the state to help bring employers to the area. So when I walked away from that, education is extremely important for a community that wants to grow. And when I look at what could happen at a Career Academy, I look at the maker spaces and the things that are going on with creativity and innovation. I feel like if you will choose to continue to make that a priority, that you will see the kinds of people that live in the Osborne community will just be benefited in a tremendous way. If you look at home values from 2012 to 2016, you see that Smyrna area grew $100,000 a house in 4 years. Osborne grew as well. Walton grew as well.
30 seconds.
The opportunity to grow home values in Osborne by stimulating it with good opportunity, I believe, has the potential to bring you another $7 million a year in revenue for the school system. And I encourage you to keep that a priority as you're doing your planning. Thank you very much.
Next is Natalie Carlamagno, who will discuss Walkout, followed by Hayden Kepner.
My name is Natalie Carlamagno. I'm a sophomore at Walton High School, and on March 14th, I organized my school's walkout to call for common sense gun reform. On March 15th, I came here and I spoke to you, and I can tell by most of your expressionless faces that you must be very happy to see me again today. On March 27th, I served an 8-hour in-school suspension for a 17-minute walkout, which was deemed disruptive. If 17 minutes is disruptive, then what do you call an 8-hour timeout? As a student, I am disappointed and ashamed of this board and of my school. You had the opportunity to support us and make this an educational and beneficial event for students and teachers. And quite frankly, you blew it. Despite what this board and my school thinks, there is no nameless adult telling me what to say tonight. I'm speaking my own opinions, and I'm much smarter than you think. I'm aware that there are elections coming up on May 22nd, and I'm aware that some of you will be running for re-election. I'm also aware that there's an election in 2020, and I hope that you are all very well aware that I'm an eligible voter in 2020. And I will be voting. On March 27th, I sat in a room with almost 300 students in silence. You did not deter us, and you will not deter us. This board and Walton have attempted to silence our voices time and time again. Can you hear me now? Since safety is your #1 priority, what are you planning to do in order to make sure that a tragedy never has to occur at any Cobb school? I would like a response. Please get your resumes ready. We will see you at the polls.
Our next speaker is Hayden Kepner, who will be followed by Catherine Valakos.
My name is Hayden Kepner. I'm afraid I'm not nearly as eloquent as Natalie was. In general, I'm very happy with Cobb County and the great schools my kids have had the privilege to attend, but I was disappointed with the punishment that was given to the students that attended to the walkout. But my main concern was in trying to find information as to how that punishment was determined. Nobody would seem to take responsibility. Mr. Ragdale is on record as saying it was a decision by the individual schools. The individual schools have said they were ordered to do this by the superintendent's office. Well, if the purpose of the punishment was to force kids to take responsibility for their actions, which I agree with, somebody has to take responsibility for that punishment so that students and parents, if they've got a concern or a question about the punishment, they could know who to turn to say, look, I've got a concern about this. My second question, so my first question is, who was it who determined this punishment? My second question is, was there any outside influence given on this punishment? Now, I hope the answer is no. I assume the answer is no. But in trying to find that answer, nobody has responded. And when I sent what I thought was a very modest open records request to try and determine this, was there any outside influence put in this decision, you can see the response was the school district said it would cost me $11,191 to get that information. Well, you can get that information for free. All you need to do is just turn to Mr. Ragsdale and say, was there anybody outside the school district that tried to influence your decision to punish the students? If the answer is no, which I hope it is, then simply let us know that there was no outside influence. If there was any outside influence, I think parents have the right to know who tried to influence the school board or the principals or the superintendents as to what sort of punishment, if any, should have been imposed upon the students for participating in the walkout. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Catherine Valakos, who will discuss reporting tool and safety. She'll be followed by Paul Alexander.
Good evening. I'm a parent of a Walton High School student, but I'm also a resident of Newtown, Connecticut, is where I grew up and where I graduated from high school. That gives me the unique experience of having a very close personal connection with the families of the tragedy at Sandy Hook. One of my kindergarten friends co-founded an organization called Sandy Hook Promise, and I'd like to know if any of you have heard of this organization, and if you haven't, I think that they can help with a gap that's needed with preventing school shootings. What they do is actually a free, I repeat that, free service of a reporting tool that's anonymous. It can be used by your cell phone, a website, or calling in to a crisis center that's set up, and then based on that, they field it and notify the administration as well as the police department. Now, of course, this is going to help with preventing school shootings because statistics show that about 80% actually report something through social media or they tell somebody, and then people feel too nervous to say anything. So giving the opportunity to the students and the teachers to report anonymously will then produce more of that. Also preventing bullying and suicides. Walton High School, unfortunately, had a freshman suicide this year. And had maybe the opportunity of a reporting tool, maybe could have prevented that as well. What the other thing is that these students, Natalie, who spoke earlier, told me of a story where she actually talked to somebody who on social media was shooting their gun and bragging about it and bragging about how quick it was. Well, do they want to call the police? Not really. They're scared to. I think it would be a really good idea because it's free. They come in and they train the students. Judy McNeil herself said she's relying on the students and the teachers and everybody and the parents to look for things and report on it. What things do you look for? Those are the things that they'll come in and teach for free. So my response I would like from you is to be able to meet with whoever that point person is, if there's a forum where we can talk about it, so we could discuss this opportunity to work with this organization. I'd love for you to give it consideration. That's it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Paul Alexander, who will discuss safety communication walkout. He'll be followed by Wendy Alexander.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Alexander, and I'm the proud father of 3 children, and I've lived in Cobb County for more than 20 years. My wife has even deeper roots in Cobb County and is a graduate of Walton High School. While some of us have different views on the best ways for the school district to achieve certain goals, I hope that we can all agree that no issues are more important facing our schools today than safety and the well-being of our students, both physical and mental. The tragic and shocking February 14 shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School has deeply affected this nation, and in particular our children, resulting in activism that we really have not seen since the Vietnam War era. With this in mind, I request that the Board of Education and Superintendent direct that all Cobb County high schools hold open, town hall-style meetings where members of the community and school officials can dialogue regarding issues raised at the March 14 National Walkout, including school safety, gun violence and mental health, district and school communications, as well as the district's reaction to the March 14 walkout and discipline meted out in response. On the subject of communications, please be aware that both before and after the walkout, I sent multiple emails and left multiple voicemail messages for Superintendent Ragsdale and Walton High School Principal McNeil, requesting the opportunity to meet to discuss my concerns. I never received a single response to my multiple meeting requests, and I'm aware of numerous other parents whose communications were similarly ignored. The extent of the communication problems at Walton is also illustrated by an incident which took place on Tuesday, March 27, the day my daughter and other Walton walkout participants were required to serve 1 day of in-school suspension for having the courage of their convictions. That morning, my wife and I attempted to schedule a meeting with Principal McNeil to discuss walkout-related matters by visiting the school's administrative offices in person. Instead of getting a meeting on the calendar, we were confronted by Walton's armed resource officer for no reason, and presumably at the direction of Principal McNeil, were threatened with a criminal trespass warning. This event and the multiple ignored inquiries underscore the need for a review of communication policies and procedures and warrant immediate changes at Walton and the superintendent's office regarding, among other things, responses to meeting requests and responses to communications in general. Further, I request that all appropriate steps be taken to ensure that Principal McNeil and other school officials are prohibited from any future intimidation tactics and misuse of the school's resource officer. Please provide responses within 30 days. Thank you.
Next is Wendy Alexander, who will discuss safety communication walkout, followed by Connie Jackson.
Good evening. I'm sincerely concerned that the position taken by the school district and our high schools in response to the March 14th national walkout has seriously damaged the reputation of our school system. For that reason, and because it is the right thing to do, I request that the Board of Education and the superintendent acknowledge that the response of the national walkout should have been handled differently. I request that all disciplinary measures in connection with the March 14th walkout be rescinded immediately. I further request that the board and superintendent acknowledge that instead of threatening our civically minded and socially engaged students, the district and its schools should have empowered our children and embraced and supported this unique learning opportunity presented by the national walkout in a manner similar to the Atlanta public school system, the Marietta City school system, DeKalb County school system, and many others in Georgia and throughout the United States of America. Surely we all support a decrease in gun violence and an increase in school safety.
and mental health resources. And I'm hopeful that the district and its schools will take meaningful steps to promote these causes. Please provide responses to my requests within 30 days. I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for your consideration.
Our final speaker is Connie Jackson, who will discuss raises.
Good evening. First, I'd like to say thank you to the superintendent and the board for, well, to the superintendent, for the raise this morning, for proposing that the $10 million that we got in the QBE funds from the governor go towards the 1.1% raise that you proposed. But the reality is that we need more. The reality is that that's not enough, especially for our employees who are on the lower end of our salary scales, our bus drivers, our parapros, our monitors, people like that. Because for a teacher, okay, we might be able to scrape by. It's a good start. But for people who are still able to get food stamps or the peach care or all those things, a 1% raise, 1.1%, is not enough. The millage rate hasn't been raised in 10 years. 10. That's a long time. And we're still at the bottom when we looked at millage rates. You know, we're still in the bottom half of that. It's time to do the hard thing for the school board and say that we value our education, our schools, and our employees enough to do that raise. 18.9 to 20. The average household, it's $80 a year. 80. That's not even $10 a month. And I think that the vast majority of parents, taxpayers, and educators, bus drivers, are all going to say that our public schools are worth it. Our children are worth it, and our educators and employees are worth it. Cobb is known for being one of the best school systems in the state and in the country. But that won't continue if we can't provide a living wage. That won't continue if we can't attract and retain quality educators, if we don't have bus drivers to drive the kids to school, if we don't have cafeteria monitors or lunchroom workers, if we don't have parapros. And that, unfortunately, is about money. We've got to do it.
20 seconds.
Please, I ask the board, take the hard step, value your employees, and raise the millage rate to give us the 2.5% raise. Thank you.
Thank you, public speakers. Next, we'll have items requiring action following executive session. Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'll remind the board that I believe we need 4 separate motions for the items that were discussed in executive session. So I ask Mr. Adams to bring those items now.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Chair, members of the board, we do indeed have 4 separate items, 2 personnel and then 2 land. Mr. Banks, I believe, afterwards. First of all, we have the usual Human Resources Personnel Report this evening, April 19th, 2018. The administration recommends the approval of the identified employment actions of those individuals listed on the Personnel Action Report as discussed in executive session. We have 8 principal level and higher position recommendations. First of all, Robert Babet for reassignment to Principal Lewis Elementary School, effective June 1. Dr. Angela Bacon, Chief Technology Officer, for retirement, effective June 1st. Dr. Camille Havis, appointment to Principal Campbell Middle School, effective June 1. Melissa Morris, Director, Academic Division, resignation, effective April 27, 2018. Dr. Lenore Niesti, appointment to Principal Lost Mountain Middle School, effective June 1. Alice Stouter, Deputy Superintendent, retirement effective August 1. Jonathan Tanner, reassignment to Principal Mabry Middle School effective June 1. And Candace Wilkes, reassignment to Principal Allatoona High School, June 1. This concludes the first of our personnel items.
Do I have a motion? Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve as read by Mr. Adams.
Second, Mr. Banks. Any discussion? Mr. Sweeney.
I just wanted to extend my appreciation to Miss Alice Stouter for your service, and your contributions to the district have been amazing, and best wishes to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Scammer.
I'd like to extend my remarks to, as Mr. Sweeney, that we are losing some very good people. I will say, though, for the most part, we'll have other opportunities to give congratulations, but Ms. Stoddard and Ms. Bacon just quietly go about their business, and they are prime examples, along with many, many others, why this school system is outstanding, and if not the best, one of the best in the state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I thought a no would make any difference, I would say no, but these are outstanding employees, and it's been a pleasure to get to know them over the years and work with them. They are part of the reason why this school system is outstanding. So we have great employees. We're going to miss you, but I would say no if it would make a difference. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Sweeney.
And I don't want you to think that I forgot Ms. Bacon, who I spoke with earlier and privately. So she knows she's going to be missed too. Thank you.
Six in favor, 0 opposed. Okay. Where are we next?
The next item for personnel, Mr. Chairman, is the recommendation to extend employment to the superintendent's cabinet. Superintendent recommends the employment of the following members of his cabinet: John Adams, Deputy Superintendent, Human Resources and Operations, beginning July 1. Sherry Hill, Chief Leadership Officer, beginning July 1. Dr. David Ciprani, Assistant Superintendent, Leadership Division, beginning July 1. Dr. Robert Downs, Assistant Superintendent, Leadership Division, beginning July 1. Robin Latazori, Assistant Superintendent, Leadership Division, beginning July 1. Dr. Philip Page, Assistant Superintendent, Leadership Division, beginning July 1. Christian Suttle, Assistant Superintendent, Leadership Division, beginning July 1. Ed Wagner, Assistant Superintendent, Leadership Division, beginning July 1. Dr. Kevin Daniel, Chief of Staff, beginning July 1. Brad Johnson, Chief Financial Officer, beginning July 1. Jennifer Lawson, Chief Academic Officer, beginning July 1. Dr. Tracy Doe, Assistant Superintendent, Teaching and Learning and Specialized Services, beginning July 1. John Floresta, Chief Strategy and Accountability Officer, beginning May 7th. And Dr. Isan Katula, Assistant Superintendent, Accountability and Research, Accountability Division, beginning July 1. That concludes the second of the two personnel matters.
Let me make one correction just so that it's read into the minutes. Sherry Hill is Chief School Leadership Officer.
Have a motion, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a recommendation that we accept the the superintendent's recommendation as presented.
Mr. Banks, seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, Mr. Chair, that it's good to have the A team coming back. We're going to miss a couple of them that we've already discussed. But again, in the last 4 to 6 years, these folks have really stepped up and hardworking, 15, 17 hours a day, some weekends, and that's what makes us the best. So to all of you, hats off, and I'll think about voting for it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Scammerhorn. Okay. We're on discussion. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Mr. Adams or
Mr. Banks, I believe you have two personnel matters. Land matters.
Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion regarding revisionary interest purchase at Mountain View. I hereby move that the board approve the following real estate contract. Purchase of revisionary interest on approximately 9.75 acres at 3448 Sandy Plains Road, Marietta, Georgia, for the sum equivalent to 10% of the purchase price received in the sale of the school site to Fuquay Acquisitions 2, LLC, but no less than $1.2 million.
Second, Mr. Scammerhorn. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hereby move that the board approve entering into a revised agreement for the purchase and sale of real property for the following. Sale of real property improvements on approximately 13.84 acres at 3448 Sandy Plains Road, Marietta, Georgia, 30066. Tax parcel number 1603-870030 to Fuquay Acquisitions 2, LLC for approximately $10,840,000, which will be approximately $783,237 per surveyed acres.
Second, Mr. Sweeney. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have action agenda items. Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, sir.
We have several on consent.
Mr. Chair, during the work session, we moved agenda item to the last position. Are we moving it for this evening's agenda, or are we keeping the same order?
Keep it the same.
We're going to just keep it in the same order as listed on the page. Perfect. There.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to need to phone a friend on the consent agenda because, to be quite honest, we've got about 3 different versions of which ones were on the consent agenda item and which ones were not. So who's got the final? All right, so what's the numbers for consent?
1.
1 is consent.
4.
What we see as number 2 here is discussion. 3 is discussion. 4 is consent. 5 is consent. 6 is discussion. 7 is discussion. 8 is discussion. And 9 is consent.
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll need a motion or without objection, Mr. Chair.
So without objection, all the consent are good. No objection. Okay, so let's go to agenda item number 2, discussion. Is there any?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to ask Mr. Brad Johnson to come up. Again, just to reiterate today's discussion, we were very pleasantly surprised with the governor's announcement to fully fund the QBE formula, restoring all austerity reductions that had been implemented upon school districts through the additional funds that were realized through the state revenue. That basically accounted for $10 million and change for us. And the following is my recommendation for that money. Before I get to the two things that were recommended, I want to reiterate again that my recommendation is to leave the previously presented balanced budget intact, meaning that the bonus, 1.1% bonus for all employees less than 238 days, and then an additional 2 days reduction without impacting pay for 238-day employees, and those 2 days will be during the week of July 4th. I want to leave those intact and unchanged. Then with the austerity reduction restoration funds, the recommendation is that we enact a 1.1% bonus to all employees across the board, and then we take the remaining funds to build up the allotment pool from the originally 6 allotment recommendation, which was going to be very difficult, but that was our recommendation to be able to sustain the bonus. And then we want to recommend that go from 6 to 19. Those 2 items will take the austerity restoration funds in whole. So I'm going to ask Mr. Johnson to continue with the presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions thus far.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, agenda item number 2 is recommendation for tentative approval of the 2019 budget. I'll reiterate again once the highlights of this tentative budget. The 2019 tentative general fund budget proposal is balanced. The proposal utilizes $7.8 million in fund balance. The proposal contains no millage increase as the millage rate presented remains at 18.9 mils. The proposal contains a salary step for eligible employees based on their salary schedule. The proposal contains a 1.1% bonus for non-238-day employees. The proposal contains a decrease in the work year for 238-day employees in lieu of a bonus to 236. The proposal contains a 1.1% salary increase for all permanent employees. And finally, the proposal proposes to increase instructional position pools from 6 to 19. The budget has already been presented to the board on 2 occasions, once on March 15th and again today on April 19th. Additionally, 1 public hearing on the budget has already been held earlier today. At this time, administration requests that the board tentatively approve the 2019 budget in order to enable the budget to be advertised as required by state law. Tentative approval is not final approval, but will give our employees and citizens a chance to review the budget. All budget data will be on the district internet for anyone interested in reviewing the tentative budget. Mr. Chair, we request the board's consideration and approval of the 2019 tentative budget. The budget is scheduled for final approval on May 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Mr. Sweeney, you have a motion.
I've been called a lot of things. Mr. Motion is not one of them.
Kind of like that.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I make a recommendation that we accept the budget as proposed, or the tentative budget as proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I have a second. Mr. Scamhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll second Mr. Sweeney's motion.
Do we have any discussion at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Sweeney.
Mr. Johnson, thank you for your detailed presentation earlier today. I did have a clarifying question, and it's on line 11 on the sheet, which is the increased classroom teacher pool by 13 positions. Does the $1.1 million, $1.2 million figure, does that just represent the change from 6 to 19?
That requests the incremental increase of 13.
Okay, so it's still about $85,000 roughly per position.
85 to 90, yes, sir.
And I understood the superintendent earlier is that this would be applicable. So it would be, let's say every one of those positions, if they were filled, if they were all parapro positions, it would be double the 19 number.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Well, let's go. Mr. John Adams, come and bring the next board agenda items.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I believe we are on agenda item that was previously 3, approval for recommendation for the approval of Georgia Department of Education and Capital Outlay project closeout for various schools. As we discussed in detail during the previous meeting, this is essentially a formality for us to remit to the state certifications or certificates of resolution indicating that all accounts for labor, materials, and services for each of these construction projects have been paid in full, and there's no claims of any nature is outstanding. That will allow us to receive the final amount of reimbursement from the state. You see these projects listed below, and the total amount of reimbursement that we anticipate receiving from the state is $1.38 million. So at absolutely no cost to the district, and we will receive $1.38 million.
Excuse me. Mr. Chastain has made a motion. Have a second. Mr. Sweeney, any discussion? Okay, we'll vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, sir. Next agenda item, recommendation to phase out the Lassiter High School auxiliary gym. Recommendation to approve number 6. Recommendation to award a contract for Harrison High School gym and theater. In accordance with the approved SPLOST 4 program, Harrison is scheduled to receive a gym and theater. Award of the contract at this time will allow us to remain on schedule and meet our scheduled substantial completion date of June 2019. We did receive 4 proposals for this project. We're recommending that you award the proposal to Carroll Daniel Construction in the amount you see there, $22,318,000. As discussed in more detail during the day meeting, they have done a great deal of work for us in the past, including Clarkdale Elementary School and Smyrna Elementary School, and we anticipate, once again, substantial completion June of 2019. And I'm available for any questions.
I would like to make that motion that we accept the superintendent's recommendation. I have a second. Mr. Chastain, any discussion? I will vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Number 7, recommendation for approval to award a contract for Walton High School Replacement School Completion, Stage 2, Phase 2, performing arts and athletic spaces. Again, as discussed in detail during our prior meeting, in accordance with SPLOST 4, Walton is scheduled to receive a replacement school. This will complete the construction of the school building, in this case, the section housing performing arts and athletic spaces. Awarding of the contract will allow us to remain on schedule. Substantial completion date of November 2019. We had 4 bids. In this case, we're recommending you award the contract to Evergreen Construction out of Atlanta, Georgia, and authorize the superintendent to execute the contract in the amount of $31,735,000 as budgeted in SPLOST 4. And I'm available for any questions.
Do we have a motion? Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a recommendation that we approve agenda item number 7, the approval to award a contract for Walton High School Replacement School Completion, Stage 2, Phase 2, of performing arts and athletic spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. We have a second with Mr. Banks. Any discussion? Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Adams, has the demolition been completed?
Yes, sir.
Now, the last time I was over there was the old school was a mountain of ground up concrete. Has that been all that been removed? And I understand most of the area that where the old school was going to be parking. Is that part of the contract?
Say that again for me, Mr. Banks.
It's the old school, the footprint. Minus the new addition, is that it's going to be parking? Is that part of the current contract that's being recommended?
Yes, sir, I believe that is.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion further? Okay, we'll vote. All in favor? 6 in favor, opposed, 0. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, sir. Agenda item number 8, recommendation for approval to award a contract for Osborne High School rebuild. Once again, in accordance with SPLOST 4, Osborne High School is scheduled for a rebuild. Awarding the contract at this time will allow us to remain on schedule. A substantial completion date of August 2020. We received 2 bids in this case and are recommending that you award the contract to Carroll Daniel Construction out of Gainesville in the amount of $47,495,000 as you see listed there and as budgeted in SPLOST 4. And as discussed in more detail, that project does include a gym, which was not included in the original planning estimates. So we anticipate an excellent result and are proud to keep our commitment to our stakeholders and look forward to proceeding with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. We have a motion. Mr. Chastain?
Yes, I would like to make the motion that we accept the recommendation of the superintendent to award a contract for Osborne High School to have its rebuild, and let's get her done.
We have a second. Mr. Sweeney? Any discussion? Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Adams, do we have an estimate as to what the capital outlay from the state might be for a project of this size and scope?
For Osborne High School, yes, sir, we do. We think that will be approximately $16 million.
Terrific. And then as far as you got substantial completion date is August 2020, so that's to open during that 2021 school year?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thank you.
August 2020.
Yep.
I will also take this opportunity to go ahead and make the comment that part of the design that is ongoing right now does include the Career Academy on the campus of Osborne. So that will be part of the rebuild project, and that is ongoing as we speak. The design is.
Mr. Chastain, allow me to commend you for being the first person in the history of the Cobb County School District to quote Larry the Cable Guy.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
We're going to have another board member come up with Water Boy. You can do it.
Okay, we'll vote. All in favor? Opposed? 0. Motion carries 6-0. Oh, boy. This brings us to board member comments, and we'll start with Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say that it's this time of year, we've got so much testing going on. Assessments never seem to stop, and it also seems that what we're doing is we're losing a lot of instructional opportunity because of the great number of testing. My son's in 7th grade. He's out for milestones this week. And I know that with the testing schedule and everything that we have coming up, particularly with AP exams, and basically closing out the year, I wish the students great success with those assessments, and also just look forward to closing out the year, and very much looking forward to the graduation ceremonies coming up in May. And thank you for the teachers and everything that the students and the families do for this school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The seat next to me is vacant tonight, and the reason for that is Miss Thayer broke her, I think, a toe in her foot, and had an operation, and the doctor told her not to come to the board meeting. That was the recommendation, so she is adhering to that recommendation, and so that's the reason she's not here tonight. I also want to say the Sprayberry Easter egg drop was very successful. Thousands and thousands and thousands of children are out there picking up Easter eggs, and even the ones dropped from the helicopter. This was I think the 8th annual Easter egg drop at Sprayberry High School. I also want to commend the Laster AP Capstone Group, who presented their projects a few weeks ago. I hope in the future somebody from the administration will give us a more in-depth presentation on what the AP Capstone is really all about, how important it is, and it's a very high-level AP situation. And I also want to thank the board and the superintendent for finding a way to give our teachers and our employees a raise. They deserve it, and I wish it could be more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Chastain? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's see. First, I'll start with last Sprayberry High School. Last Saturday celebrated its 65th anniversary. The oldest high school in Cobb County, right? Sprayberry. Is it Sprayberry? What? Yeah. North Cobb's older? All right. So he's second oldest. But anyway, 65 years. So people showed up. They had classrooms designated for the various decades since the 50s. And Coach Jim Frazier was there. Jim Frazier, whose name is on the stadium, Jim Frazier Stadium. So it was a great time. Mr. Superintendent showed up. In fact, he might be about to say something about it. I don't know. But that was fantastic. Earlier this week, we celebrated the Volunteer of the Year. What day was that? Tuesday? Or was that last week? Anyway, we had the Volunteer of the Year, and we celebrate all of the people who volunteer in all of our schools across Cobb County, because teachers can only do so much, and then there's other things that happen, and usually it's a parent, or in some cases it's not even somebody that even has a kid in the school. It's somebody that just says, I want to come help somebody. So we honored the Volunteers of the Year and all volunteers in our schools. And then this Saturday, I'm supposed to report to Lockheed Martin over here on South Cobb at 6 a.m. We're getting ready for and I don't remember the official name, but we're having a coding competition. And I think some of our Cobb students will be participating, as well as students from around the country. I understand we're going to have one coding team that happens to be in the area from California. They'll be participating, and I think my shift's from 6 to 12, but the kids will be there almost all day. I've never been to a coding competition. I have a T-shirt to wear, but I would encourage you, if you're involved in coding in Cobb County, be on the lookout and think about participating in the days maybe next year. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chastain. Mr. Scammahorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before my remarks, if I could ask Mr. Chastain, are you talking about computer coding? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, computer coding.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and you're participating?
I am the sentry.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not going near a computer. I'm just going to stand at the door and just kind of look official.
Oh, I thought you meant you were 100 years old as a sentry. No, thank you. I just want to make sure we understood that. Mr. Chair, it's been a couple of months since I have recognized our heroes. And for those of you that don't realize it, our officers nationwide and firemen and officers, we lose 4 to 6 police officers nationwide every month. There are very few of us that have the fortitude, the courage to get up, put that uniform on, knowing full well the dangers that are facing you. But yet our officers, men and women, they get up because they have a high moral standard and they want to protect the rest of us that are not able or not trained to do so. April's not over yet, but we've already lost 4 officers. Yarmouth Police Department in Maine. Police Officer Sean McNaney Gannon, end of watch, April the 12th, 2018. And if I can get my, there we go. Whitesboro Police Department, New York. Patrolman Kevin F. Cosley, end of watch, Wednesday, April the 11th, 2018. Huntsville Police Department, Alabama, our neighbor. End of watch, our police officer Keith O'Neill Earl, end of watch, April the 9th, 2018. Saluda County Sheriff's Office, South Carolina, our neighbor to the other direction. Corporal Dale Shannon Hallman, end of watch, April the 6th, 2018. Please keep these patrolmen and their families in your thoughts and prayers. And I can only hope that we continue to find and to raise fine young men and ladies that will continue the tradition that these folks have done, and that those that have been able to retire and wear the uniform proudly. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scamhorn. Mr. Morgan? Mr. Ragsdale?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. Once again, we come tonight and have to unfortunately recognize that we have lost an additional 3 students from our district. Laura Addison, an 8th grade student at Autry Middle School. Brian Barber, a 2nd grade student at Teasley Elementary School. And Grace Bunky, a 9th grade student at Walton High School. Certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to these families, as those of us that have never had to do this and hopefully never will cannot understand the pain that a family goes through when a parent has to bury a child. So certainly our thoughts are heavy, and prayers go out to those families. Mr. Chastain has mentioned we did have a 65th anniversary of Sprayberry High School, and one of the things that I found most interesting was one of the principals that was recognized as being one of the first principals was there. Didn't look quite the same, but I don't think any of us will 65 years later after we've had a job like being a principal at Sprayberry High School. Did I say something wrong? Okay. When you hear people talking, with my state of mind, I'm kind of wondering if I'm saying everything right. So, Mr. Chastain, I will say that being that you're going to be involved in the coding at Lockheed, I would anticipate that those students from Cobb County would be given a certain straight pathway to the head of the line there, and would be the least of the expectation. I also want to throw out an appreciation to Mr. Ben Needle, one of the avid teachers at Wheeler High School. He had asked me to come out and speak to the class, and I always thoroughly enjoy speaking to high school classes. I'll be going to South Cobb next week, and so it's always encouraging to speak to the high school classes, especially, and see the bright futures that are in store for our students. I also want to express appreciation to the board for the vote on the tentative budget. It goes without saying, but we still need to say that we wish we could do more for our teachers than a 1.1% raise. But every dollar that we can find, we're always going to strive to put that towards our employees. So I appreciate the vote on the tentative budget tonight. A good news story. As you know, when we embarked on the IE squared pathway, we had to put together targets and schools that reach those targets. If you remember the crazy formula about it's a 5-year contract over a 7-year period, and the first year is benchmark, and the last year is consequences, and all of the things that go into making of the sausage. The great news about this is that we had 94% of our schools meet the year one contract goals. And as you remember, or as you will remember, a school can make the growth of the 3 years in 1 year. So you can make all 3 years of growth in 1 year, and you're good. Check the box off, move forward. Those schools, we only had 6 that did not meet the first year goals. There's nothing to be alarmed about with that because there are numerous years to make that growth in the upcoming years. The great news about this is that we had the lowest percentage of schools to not meet the first year goals of any school district in the metro area. Matter of fact, the second place school district was not really close. So everybody is to be congratulated for the hard work that went into that. Exactly. And this is why I say, when we talk about our employees, the teachers are really the ones that bring us the success. But it takes the entire team. Every team member is very important. And as also Mr. Chastain alluded to, we had our Volunteer of the Year luncheon, and every member of the team plays a pivotal role in the success of our students. And I always use stories with our volunteers, but it's just a great, great thing that we do to recognize as a district the volunteers of the year, meaning that there are many other volunteers that were still very important, but one of those volunteers rose to the top to be selected as volunteer of the year. And I just appreciate the district, the board allowing us to do those things to recognize those employees. Finally, we do need to recognize some quitters. I'm just kidding, but I call everybody that retires that because I'm jealous because I can't get there yet. But I remember when I was the CTO and hired Angie to be the Director of Instructional Technology. So that's been a minute. And I really appreciate everything that you have done for our technology division in this district, and we will definitely miss you as a district, and we'll miss you as an executive cabinet as well. You've done a tremendous job, and I appreciate that. And Alice actually came back from retirement. She and I worked together as the 2 deputies back in the day, which has also been a minute. But I tell you, it's the institutional knowledge that you have and that you brought back to us. We could not be more appreciative for everything you have done for us. You will definitely be missed. Feel free to drop your cookies by anytime you want to for executive cabinet meetings. I think I'm not going to say that's the biggest miss, but it's up there. But in all seriousness, though, we appreciate everything that you have done for us. And I truly mean this when I say that you both are not only an asset to executive cabinet, but you're an asset to the district. And you both will be tremendously missed in both the district and on executive cabinet. So I appreciate everything you've done for us both. So congratulations to you both. And then finally, I'd like to welcome to Executive Cabinet Sherry Hill, who is no stranger to anyone and is already on Cabinet, and then John Floresta, who is coming back to us after leaving and figuring out he needed to be back here. So I guess Jennifer now is not the rookie, and we'll have to initiate the others. So I guess you get a pass now, Jennifer. But I just want to say again a note of appreciation to the board that it means a lot to me, but I know it means a lot to the team to have a unanimous approval from the board on cabinet. It's when you get to thinking about it, it's pretty daunting to know that every year you 7, and I'm sure Susan is watching, decide on whether or not employment continues for executive cabinet, and myself. So we take very seriously the task that you have charged us with, and I hope that you see the work that we do as a team, but inclusive as a team, meaning the board, because it starts with us. And trust me when I say that cabinet sees the relationship that we have, and that carries out to every employee. So I really appreciate the vote of confidence from the board in everything that we do. I mean, everything's always not going to be a 7-0 vote, and we're not always going to agree, but we will always agree on our one goal of student success. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Mr. Sweeney?
I just want to back up Mr. Chastain's claim earlier. Sprayberry, although the current facility was built in 1973, it has a 65-year history. McEachern was in 1933, but I don't believe it was a high school at the time. That's right. So,
well, you know, Scott has his facts.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Okay, in closing, I'd like to thank the Campbell High School staff and Mr. Josh Ford, assistant principal, came out tonight and fed us. Jasmine Simmons, Micaiah Reeder, Rebecca Tomey, and Meredith Moore, the teacher, with them. Great meal, well appreciated, and I always enjoy that. Thank you again. Speaking of food, I had the pleasure of attending the Kitchen Kids Cafe at Cheatham Hill Elementary with Monica Alicia, and that is an event that goes on every year, and that's a wonderful meal in itself. Always have a pleasure attending that. Third is had the evening at Smith Middle School with the Lion King middle school production. We had the director, Kayla Danielle Murphy, music director, Kate Chastain, choreographer, Donna McCullough, and there are several others that were involved. And this was a great event as well. In closing, I'd like to thank Ms. Stouter and Dr. Bacon for their services. Well done. Thank you. If there's no objection, we're adjourned.